Hello, everyone. This is Eric Gibbs with Gambling News, and I'm here today with Peter Bassill from Hedgehog Security. Peter is the founder and CEO of the company and has an interesting background. Not only has he been in the information security industry for over 25 years, he is currently operating Hedgehog Security from a yacht, a 46-foot yacht, which is now anchored. It is docked, but it gives him the ability to be mobile, and the yacht is completely self-sustaining, which makes Peter and Hedgehog one of the few green companies operating in the cybersecurity space. For those unfamiliar, Hedgehog Security is a penetration testing and information security consultancy that has been providing its services to companies all across the globe since 2009. Peter, thank you for joining us today. This should be a very interesting podcast, especially in light of some of the recent events that have happened around the world in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Eric.
My pleasure. Now, as we were discussing earlier, you've been in the information security industry for more than 25 years now. How did you get your start in cybersecurity?
That's a really good question. So back when I started doing it, it wasn't really an industry. It was more kind of reacting to what's going on in the world. So really, I think I probably started dabbling with what we now call cybersecurity when I was about 8 years old. And there was this thing called the internet, and it was really, really interesting. And I kind of wanted to get in on it and understand about the internet. So at that time, we had a Dragon 64 personal computer. So I read a lot of things at reference libraries. I spent a lot of time in reference libraries. And there was this place called Maplin, or in America, it'd be Radio Shack. And they sold component parts. So I built a modem. After a few failed attempts, I actually got it to start dialing out and started dialing bulletin boards. And I still remember the telling off I got from my parents running up a very large phone bill in the early 80s from doing this. And really, it's evolved from there. I'm naturally an inquisitive mind, love puzzle solving, love any kind of puzzles I can get my hands on. So cybersecurity kind of naturally evolved out of there. I got into IT at a very early age and was looking at network admin roles. My first real break was working for Victor Chandler at Gibraltar, running networks and security there. And that was back in the late 90s. And really, it's just been a natural progression of continual learning and discovery, and never really sort of taking a device's perceived use for granted. Mm-hmm. So things like, Xboxes and PlayStations don't really stay assembled for very long. I was one of those kids that took VCRs apart at regular basis, much to the frustrations of my parents. And it's just evolved from there. I mean, now I'm a father. I've got 2-year-old twins. So now there's nothing in the child arena that is internet connected that's safe. I've been taking pretty much everything there, apart from baby cams to monitoring devices. So it's very much my mindset is puzzle orientated, always wanting to solve it and always wanting to try and find better ways to keep things together. And security is just something I found that I'm really good at and absolutely love. And there's not a day goes past when I think there could be a better job out there for me. The job I've got is the best job in the world.
Well, one thing's for sure, I mean, in your field, having a high degree of technical expertise and that ability to tinker are formidable skills, because as you are fully aware, the cybersecurity element is constantly evolving. It is not stagnant. It never has been, and it never will be. So there's always something new that has to be uncovered, discovered, figured out. And we've seen that in a number of high profile attacks over the recent years. For those of you who have been following our podcast series, and as well as those that are just joining, this is the first fully audio podcast that we've done, and it's partially because we wanted to add an element of mystery. This is a cybersecurity topic, and having it as an audio only podcast gives it a little bit more of that clandestine feel that is highly relevant in the industry. Now, Hedgehog, provides services to companies all around the world. What makes your company better from the others that are in the field?
If you asked me that sort of 5-6 years ago, it would have been quite easy to answer, because we're very detail orientated, and we love beautiful reports. It was Marty Rolsh that wrote a book on security visualization, but kind of we love to be able to actually turn our reports into something more visual. Because one of the biggest challenges that we see for organizations that are employing pen testing firms is they go through all the pain of having the test run, and then at the end of the day they get a report, and it's generally like 40, 50, 60 pages long, written in techno babble, as one CEO put to me very recently. If I can translate that into English, it would be really lovely. So we've always looked at doing things visually, trying to break down the technical barriers for CEOs and chief information officers, so that it's a lot easier to understand. As kind of the years have gone on, especially through the whole COVID pandemic, we found the things that are setting us apart from our peers in the industry has got less and less. And we're now seeing that what really separates us from a lot of the other firms is we like to add a little more, we call it zazzle, to the engagement. So we're not looking just to identify the risks and the vulnerabilities that exist within the platforms. We're looking to answer the question of, if an attacker was going to take this all the way, actually, how far can they go? So with a typical pen test, you're going to have a lot of vulnerabilities identified. We're looking at, we're going to identify those same vulnerabilities. How can we bring those vulnerabilities together and chain them together to leverage access into an operator's environment? How can we start manipulating roulette games online to better leverage payouts if we can take 4 or 5 different vulnerabilities together as one? So for us, it's kind of our technical capabilities and our attention to detail, coupled in with some really lovely and beautiful reports.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what separates us from everyone else. Well, I wouldn't say everyone else, because there are some really, really good testing firms out there that we stand shoulder to shoulder with, and we enjoy working with them and against them. But it is really, it's our reporting and our attention to detail that kind of comes through, and we are really easy to work with as well. All of our clients love working with us because we make the whole process very simple.
That's awesome. You've mentioned a couple of times already pen testing. In layman's terms, for the CEOs that need basic English, can you break down what a pen test involves?
Of course I can. So the easiest way to look at a pen test is essentially, we're going to attempt to break into you, and then we're going to give you a nice document that tells you how we did it and where you can be better. With a pen test, there's 7 steps really to every test, and it starts with the pre-engagement. So that's where me as the CEO and my head of business development will sit down with the client, and we'll understand what is it they're looking to get out of their pen test. So they might come to us and say, Peter, we've got a scope. We want you to test our online casino. So we will drill into that and understand, well, what is it just the online casino? Do you want us to test your entire operation? What's our starting point? Do you want us to just start with your company name and see what else we can identify? So once we have the pre-engagement done, that gives us our scope of work, and that leads us into one area that not a lot of people see is intelligence gathering.
Right.
So this goes on in the background, normally 1 or 2 weeks before the pen test starts. And there's nothing active, everything is passive. So we're going to be looking at people's Twitter feeds, their LinkedIn profiles, and essentially we're going to data mine a large map of that company. So we know who runs it, who the investors are, who the key people are. And this is one area where we've had some really significant wins where we know we can get access to the company before we've even started, because we'll have identified things like usernames and passwords that have been left by developers in development repositories. So we're doing all of that passively in the background. When we get to the start date, the very first thing that's going to happen on day one is reconnaissance. So the guys and girls are going to do some technical reconnaissance, look at understanding what technologies are in play. We're going to look through all the different systems that are within the scope and fingerprint them. So we're going to know, is it a Windows machine, a Mac, a Linux box? What's the hardware? What version of operating system? And just get a really good technical picture. Within that, if we are engaged to look more at the business holistically, we might start putting in some fake phone calls into reception, just start talking to people, chatting with HR, chatting with finance. Finance teams are wonderful people to talk to, especially start talking about, oh, I've got an invoice I need to pay you, and what the bank details and how do I get this money to you. You can start getting a lot more information. Then we come on to analysis where we've got data. We need to understand what that data is, and so we'll start analyzing it. We'll do vulnerability scanning, looking for weaknesses and security issues, and identifying where the key issues are, what their criticality levels are, and how they relate to the business and how they could potentially cause harm to the business. This is where we'll also identify what we call opportunities for improvement. This is where operators have done things right, but they could have done it slightly better to give them an even more secure operation. And then from there, we get onto the bit which we all think is the fun part. And it's so those initial steps are the part you never, ever see in Hollywood movies. Right. The next part is the exploitation, which Hollywood are all over. And it is the fun part, but it's possibly the smallest part going in the pen test. And that's where we actually take those vulnerabilities and security weaknesses and we actually leverage them to get access into other systems. And that then brings on to post-exploitation, which basically is a infinite loop back to reconnaissance. So we'll exploit something, and then from that machine that we've exploited, we'll then go back and do all the reconnaissance and analysis from that machine's point of view. And then the very last stage, of course, is reporting, which can take a fair amount of time, depending. I mean, our average pen test will probably have 4 or 5 gigabytes of data to sift through and form into a report, plus maybe 100 or 200 screencasts. So our team absolutely love, especially in the exploitation part, recording their screen. It helps in the QA and the peer review process, but it also helps the client if we can give them a screencast of how we ran an exploit. Their techs can run it all again and see how it worked. So it really helps with the educational piece.
Sure.
And that's really what goes on in a penetration test.
It's definitely very detailed, and rightfully so. There's a lot of moving parts that have to be explored and examined to really understand the level of security that the platform has. Now, over the past couple of years, there have been several high-profile hacks, both of land-based casinos as well as online platforms. Have you seen an increase from the gaming industry in contact for you to provide your services?
Um, there has been it's quite difficult. So a lot of operators are going to talk primarily with their large IT integrators. Um, so we're certainly seeing a lot more gaming engagements coming
Mhm.
through IT integrators. We're not getting many operators come direct to us, which I think is a bit of a shame because going to be it's going to be a lot easier to spec out a pen test that's going to really drive good internal value for an online casino or an online poker platform,
Right.
um, by talking direct with the client rather than going through an IT integrator. Um, but there's definitely more of a shift towards operators looking inwardly at themselves and saying, okay, we've got a market presence. Our clients and customers are now starting to demand better levels of security.
Mhm.
And we know since COVID that the attackers are a lot more prevalent. So
Right.
what is it we can do? Um, and that's one of the really great questions that we love answering. It's just spending 3-4 hours working with a client just to understand, well, actually, what is it we can do to help you better improve your security. And yeah, we are seeing more coming forward. There's thousands and thousands of operators out there.
And that kind of leads into my next question, which was if you've seen iGaming operators begin to take online security seriously enough, and you kind of alluded to the fact that there is more involvement, more engagement than there was a year ago. However,
Mm,
there's a difference between engagement in the sense of, yeah, let's see if we should explore better security, and then actually following through with that. So,
yeah,
you can talk to an operator and explain to them why they should, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to move forward. So are you seeing more operators take online security seriously?
yeah, yeah, definitely. We're onboarding, I'd say, one new operator a month at the moment, who's actively signed on the line. Say, okay, we're going to go ahead with a penetration test, um, or a general security review,
Mhm.
which is it's really good. Yeah, it's great to see. Unfortunately, the thing that we are seeing is pretty much all of those that are currently onboarding have either been breached or have had a very, very near miss. So they've felt the pain, and they've made that realization through having felt the pain of
Right.
either being attacked and survived it or being attacked and not survived it. And now they want to kind of close off those gaps and make sure that their shields are up. Because at the end of the day, if their shields are sufficiently up to a point where it's easier for the attackers to go after a different operator, that's what the attackers will do. They'll always go for the easier ones to get.
Sure. And it's unfortunate. You're absolutely right. The greatest impetus for change is an attack, and it
Yep.
really shouldn't be at this stage. We've had the internet around for so long. We've had hacks around for so long. It's really incumbent, especially in the iGaming industry, that businesses take uh, the topic of security seriously as much as they take money making seriously. It's
Mm.
one produces direct income, the other one stops direct income immediately. So it's very important that iGaming operators and all businesses on the internet understand how to engage companies like Hedgehog to improve their security and protect not only their assets, their physical assets, but protect their users, which are the source of those assets. So hopefully more iGaming operators will wake up and realize that they need to start reaching out to you.
Yeah,
Now,
I think one of the things they also need to start doing is decoupling the entire view of cybersecurity from IT.
mhm,
Um, so there's a lot more involved in cybersecurity than technology. So we've always looked at it
sure,
as it's 70% the people, 20% the process, and 10% the technology. And when they start to
Yeah,
look at it like that, it's more of a business thing than an
sure.
IT thing.
I mean, IT is, as the name implies, information technology. It's the technology that puts together the network, but that's really almost the extent of it.
Mm.
Security is completely a separate field. It's independent of your hard drives and your servers and your Cat5 cables, and all of
Yeah,
that
I
stuff that
mean,
makes up the physical network. Security is, as you know, so much more intricate and deserves to have its own set of eyes looking at it all
yeah,
the time.
a, a really great example from a very recent test was we're looking at an onboarding screen for a client. Um, and we identified that there were particular things that could be done on via this onboarding screen to send tens of thousands of emails to the KYC team.
Mm.
Um, and the view was, well, that's not really a security issue. Well, it is, because if we can overload your KYC team, that's going to stop your business for a while.
Sure.
Um, and there was kind of like that light bulb moment just went off. It's like, oh yeah, we see that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. There's a certain level of misunderstanding about how exploits can happen, where they can happen,
Mm.
and when. And that's why it's so important that Hedgehog be able to provide its services, especially to the iGaming industry. Um, Now, I understand that you actually have a couple of white hat hackers working for you. Is that correct?
Yeah. So from the technology side, on the technical side, there's a team of 8 of us. So we're made up of 2 security researchers, myself and TJ. TJ's over in Japan. We've got 4 pen testers. So we have 1 team leader, Woody, who's a really talented guy. And then he's got a team of 3 pen testers
Wow.
who basically doing the pen tests over and over. And then they're supported by 2 threat and intelligence analysts. So our 2 threat intelligence analysts basically sit every day just looking at what are the new emerging threats, identifying, I suppose, really identifying vulnerabilities they think are cool that the guys really need to know about, and then
Mm-hmm.
working with the guys to develop exploits that we can then reuse in our tests. So we're a very small team. We're not a big team. We've grown organically, and we all feel that from the technical side, the 8 of us is the perfect number at the moment.
Very cool. But you have a very well-rounded team, and that obviously helps to ensure that they're looking at the problem from all different angles. So there's definitely a lot of advantages with Hedgehog right now. And speaking of
Yeah.
the advantages, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing when you conduct tests? And I'm not necessarily referring to getting over, the opposition from operators,
Hmm.
but the physical testing. What are some of the challenges that you have come across?
I think the biggest challenge is, well, the number one challenge is time. So
Mhm.
we'll often get into a pen test, and yeah, some clients are really great about it. If we say, well, we're going to need a couple more days on this because we've identified something we really want to drill into, um, we are always running up against a clock and a hard stop. So clients like to have a predefined amount of testing time because
Sure.
they want to know how much they're paying. We do have a few clients that have gone, okay, well, what we're going to do is we'll give you a number of days and then test, and then we'll see where we get to. But time is always one of the biggest challenges. And within the specifically the iGaming sector, there's another aspect of time as well, which is we don't want to hit our clients during engagements at key key player times.
Hmm.
So it can lead to us working some very interesting and odd hours.
I would
Um,
imagine.
you know, it's not uncommon for us to start at 3 in the morning
Wow.
because that platform is at its quietest then. Um, so yeah, time is one of the challenges. Scope is another one, but the scope is more, it's about educating the clients as to what they really need in a scope, and then going back to like, it's not just a technology issue. I think moving forward, one of the future challenges we're seeing is the current talent pool. So the current talent pool, it's hard to find testers that fit our mold, because all of our testers are very much tinkerers. So they like to get their hands onto technology and take it apart and see how it works, which is very evident in our medical device testing side of things, where we will take medical devices apart, and you will see guys with soldering irons attaching new headers to printed circuit boards, so that we can start playing at the really low level of the firmware. So we're finding a lot of those guys and girls are starting to get older, because those are skills that have very much gone with the times. So that's really our biggest challenges.
Well, I can understand how that can start to become a problem. We're not in the era anymore of people building their own computers. Everything comes pre-fabricated now, and it's I think we're losing a lot of that desire to tinker, at least on a large scale. There are obviously still some, as you know by your recent hires, but in general, I think you're absolutely right. There's less of a desire to get in there quizzically and figure out how to manipulate the hardware and the software.
I recently got told off by a recruiter for we had a candidate for an interview, and the very first question was, here's a PCB, here's a resistor, solder A to B, please.
No.
And although having said that, we did interview an intern, a lovely young girl, straight out of sixth form college, and I gave her exactly the same question. She went, really? Okay. 30 seconds later, beautiful soldering job. I was just like, wonderful.
Wow.
Welcome aboard.
That's so cool. That's awesome. It's good to see that there are still those out there willing to dive in. Peter, really, that's all that I had on my questions for today. We definitely will have to have a follow-up podcast, preferably on board the yacht, but we'll see how that goes. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, it's been absolutely wonderful, wonderful joining you for this podcast.
That's great. It was our pleasure having you, and we definitely look forward to seeing Hedgehog grow and help keep the iGaming space safe and secure for everybody. Thank you, Peter, again, and we will definitely be in touch.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Eric. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.